Good morning, everyone. Very happy to have you here. Unfortunately, the international colleagues for whom we had organized this event were not able to come for different reasons. But at the same time, I would say that we will inform them about these discussions and the results, and all the proceedings would be sent to our international colleagues because we attach great importance to probation service. I'm Nina Karapetyan from the HELSINKI Association. There's a problem with the microphones, but I would like to ask all of us to have 1 minute of silence for honoring the memory of our fallen soldiers, after which we'll continue our discussions. Thank you. The HELSINKI Association, together with its partners, started to work on the changes, and in 2018 we had all the chances to start these effective changes, and we started a program specifically related to the probation service, because this was an important function within the criminal justice general system. I will pass the microphone to Bella Sargsyan to tell us about the project generally, and we will continue onwards. Thank you, everyone who has come, who is present here. These are difficult days for us, but it's important for us to continue our work in times of difficulty as well. And this is one of the steps that we're taking in that regard. In brief, the project is implemented by the EPF, Helsinki Association, and the Power of Law Consortium. And the main objective here is to support judicial reforms in Armenia. The support would be from the civil society aspect and the supervision of this and participation of the civil society. When we were thinking about this project, many partners, colleagues would say that if the government does this, if it does something else, if the reforms go this way or the other way, and we thought that it would be the right thing to draft a project which would be independent of the direction that the government would take, and as if we are successful in this endeavor, because the key point is the unloading of the judicial system through the probation service. So we want to strengthen the alternative mechanisms for reducing the number of cases in courts. And it is obvious that any government, any reform program, any judicial plans, the workload of the judges is a huge problem. You know that in recent years, we have the statistics, I'm not very sure about that, but nonetheless we have judges which have 3,000 cases. And if you look at the the concept and the strategy of the judicial reforms of the government, one of the main activities is reducing the burden of the courts, the workload of the courts. One of the activities would be, for example, the Board of Trustees, improving the work of the Board of Trustees, adjacent to local self-governing bodies, because if these boards function properly, we will have less cases in courts. We also try to make probation services more accessible to people, because not many people know about that, and I think Hasmik and others will talk about that in more detail. Also, we want to improve the public trust in courts, and the Helsinki Association is dealing with this. And we also try to teach the civil society and journalists about monitoring of courts, because the contact with journalists and the work with the courts is an important aspect. And we work a lot on arbitrage and mediation institutions. Astrid is here and she can answer the questions on what we do specifically. We are working with the Justice Ministry on that. We have helped the ministry to draft a concept paper for the arbitrage center. And this is one of the directions of government activities for developing arbitrage in the country. And the logic is, if arbitrage institution starts functioning properly in the country, we will have lower number of cases in courts, going to courts. Maybe I'll stop here, and if there are questions on the project, what we do, what our organization does, what other organizations do, I will answer those questions with pleasure, because I think it is very important to work transparently. And unfortunately, there are a lot of misconceptions, mythological and misunderstanding among the mass media, in particular on the activities of the civil society and what the civil society does in general. And if there are media representatives, we are ready to answer all of your questions as well regarding what we do and what do we deal with judicial reforms, work in the direction of judicial reforms in general, or any other activity that we do. Thank you. It is judicial reforms and justice reforms need to be number one priority in the country, and what we do is for ensuring reforms. And everybody today is in a bad psychological condition, I would say, but we nonetheless continue to work. No matter how severe the difficulties are, we will continue to work, because this is an important direction of the activity for establishing democracy, human rights in the country. And we have a small video film so that we will present probation to the public. This is an animation. We'll ask our technician to put it on the screen. It's a 1-2 minute video film, not long. We have tried to explain in simple and clear terms what probation is, because it's not easy to explain it to the public what probation is. We have another opportunity to do another video film, and we will try to explain probation further, because we want to be a bridge between the government and the society, and we will do that putting in all our efforts. Hasmik Harutyunyan is our legal expert who did a study of probation service. One phase related to the legal framework and recommendations. Second, we had a monitoring of the probation officers, and also people receive services of the probation service. We have interesting analysis. Some of it is already put in order. We will finalize the rest in the coming future. And we already have positive dynamics of changes, and people have started to put trust in the probation service, and each person involved notices the changes, and will have to provide further support in order to fully establish the service, so that outside this project we will be able to provide further service. You know that because of the coronavirus and the war, we have huge difficulties right now, but we have nonetheless tried to find donors who will help us to further our efforts. Now I'll pass the microphone to Hasmik. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Karapetyan. And the project and the discussion that we have today is very important. And it is important to return to usual work, both on the side of the government and non-governmental civil society sector, because the continuation of our work and our functions, performing our functions, would be the cornerstone of our future development. And the evaluation that we do in the current situation, we hope that it will help us to further advance the strengthening of democracy, and we hope that we'll be able to implement what we plan or what we and our thoughts about the further support. And I will talk about studies where I have participated myself. The first study was about the legal framework of the probation service. And this would lead us to the practical aspects to the probation service and how it works and what results we've had since 2016, what kind of challenges we still have at all levels within the framework of the strategy, of course, and what would be our future steps. And you know that the main idea of the probation service is the rehabilitative justice, which is the main component of one of the main components of the reform. Based on the study of the legislation and the legal framework, the criminal code, and other pieces of legislation, as well as the decisions of the government, and also the drafts of the criminal code and the criminal procedural code, which were supposed to have huge impact on the probation service, and things that we see in practice are not directly the shortcomings of the probation service, but those are the results of the lack of comprehensive legal regulations. And throughout these 4 years already having the probation service and the legal framework, as if we do not have and there's still there was an interruption. In 2018, when we were doing the conceptual framework, we had the basis that for long years the social, psychological and rehabilitation work were not very effective. And secondly, our court practices, judicial practices, issued a lot of remand sentences. And these were the two main problems that were at the basis of the concept paper for the service, and also for further legal regulations. And after some stages in 2016, we were able to adopt the probation service law, which regulated the objectives of the service and its aims and directions. We tried to provide the community direction here in order to replace the punishments based on imprisonment. And whatever we had in the law was in line with the international standards and the work of the similar institutions in other countries. So what issues do we see related to the probation service? That is reducing the number of offenses and re-offenses, and also reducing the load of the prisons. In 2013, when we were discussing these issues already, together with the civil society, we always presented recommendations to the government that the reduction of the load of prisons should not be the aim of the probation service, because this reduction in the load should have been the result of the probation service, not the objective or the aim of the service. If this would have been the aim, we would have an artificial change in the objectives, and the result of our monitoring shows that the parole institution and alternative punishments reduced the load of the prisons, but this was not the concept that we had put on at the basis of the probation service. So this was not the natural result of the activities that were done, but this was the artificial and byproduct of those actions. And that is why, because we see the high rate of offenses right now, which will result in the same problem in the future, overcrowded prisons. This is the aims that we had for the legal regulations and the kind of concerns we had with regard to that. And the correction and resocialization of the offenders is another aspect of the work of probation professionals. And also this court decisions on the preventive measures to be more informative, based on more information and more knowledge. And in this regard, the law is in line with international standards, but the question is what kind of ground we have for further improvement of what we had already stipulated in the legislation. In our criminal and criminal procedural codes, we see that there is broad jurisdiction for probation service, and when it comes to functions, we have the possibility for using that service at all levels of the pre-trial and trial phases, and also alternative measures as well, house arrest, for example, bail, and also guarantees or educational surveillance of young people, and also military service from certain aspects. And during the study, we have to say that we came to the conclusion that other services were not fully adequate in order for the probation service to implement its functions to the full, because we had a comprehensive regulation, lack of a comprehensive regulation. As a result, people who need to do X function should have the possibility to do that. But we see that in some places these possibilities are not formally available because the law does not stipulate those, and is related to security measures as well. Another important function which would be, for example, prohibition of visiting certain places for certain people, special monitoring measures for behavior, participation in social work and public work, which are in the new criminal code. This has been discussed for long years, and during the years that the probation service was functioning, these regulations were not there, and this is a gap in the legislation related to their work. Another important aspect is related to mediation and parole institution, resocialization. The mediation concept, which was at the basis of the probation service, and we have in the criminal procedural code, this is an institution for mediation between the victim and the proband and the services, and this doesn't clarify what part or which probation professionals will be dealing with the mediation work, because this is a work that needs professionalism, and you cannot expect that all the probation professionals in the given area will be able to do mediation. And we also need to further clarify the standards for mediation and the requirements. And this is a huge problem, because in this aspect of the probation service has not been done properly, has not been implemented properly. One of the most successful components in the conditions of the lack of adequate resources and working with different civil society organizations, we have been able to have some progress in cultural, sports, and other activities which have been helpful in rehabilitation work. But the parole reports on the parole shows us that there is a hindrance, and the reports that we have on parole show us that there's work that needs to be done, because probation service professionals need to have access to huge information which would allow them to draft reports which would be important for decision makers. When it comes to reports, we have certain shortcomings, unfortunately, because the information flow that would come from the prisoners, the information we get from them is not adequate for doing the reports to the full and to make these reports a powerful tool, and this should be a challenge for us. I talked about mediation, and another important aspect is electronic monitoring, which has been introduced but not used to the full yet. When we're doing the concept, this was one of the most important key features, but in 2019 I have to say we still do not have it implemented yet. And if we had implemented this would have been a powerful tool for reducing the number of prison sentences in general and ensure progress of the service, and this is because the electronic monitoring systems are not cheap and they're expensive, and that's why we have a gap here. Individual institutions, I have to say that about the certain institutions, I have to say that we have very specific objectives for the probation service, but with the legal framework, legislative regulations did not become totally comprehensive, and we were not able to do a harmonized legal framework which would allow the probation service to do its work properly together with other institutions. And that is why we have a small part of the probation service functions implemented. When it comes to practices, maybe we'll have questions and answers. Maybe we continue because since April, our monitoring experts of the organization did a monitoring of the legislative framework, and this was done based on a questionnaire, meetings and interviews with the beneficiaries and also probation professionals. Did this in a number of marzes, Tavush, Lori, Yerevan, in central offices and regional offices, and this is a continuous work, and we still continue this monitoring, and we'll have more results coming in. What we record here, the main problem that we see here as a result of this monitoring is the material technical provisions of central and regional offices, starting from the buildings, the actual physical location of the buildings, and if we do not know what the building is going to be used for right from the beginning, let's say a regional office in a Mars is located on the premises of an NGO, we cannot implement the real objectives of the regional office's operation. And one of the monitors mentioned that he was conducting the interview in the Judicial Judgments Enforcement Office premises. So this was not the proper venue to have the interview. And this is not conducive to the implementation of the probation service according to its roles and aims, to its functions and aims. So in this initial phase, we have found out that there is a problem with internet access. In some regional offices, we have computers, for example, in Tavush region, let's say, but there is no internet connection. And without internet connection, probation professionals cannot do their job properly, preparing reports, etc. And they will not be able to perform adequately. Another aspect is the lack of awareness building activities through the mass media, etc. How do we explain to the public about the probation service and what it does, so that when the offenders would go back to the society, how the society should deal with them, And another key aspect of the work is the evaluation of risks and needs and preparing reports based on that. For that, we need certain criteria and standards in order to do an accurate assessment of the skills and work of the probation services. But this is not being done to the full and deeply enough. And in this regard, the civil society is very important here, because some projects, some activities which are not done by the government are being done by civil society organizations. When it comes to cultural activities, training courses, etc., which allows us to cover the gaps to some extent here. At this point, this is what I had to say, and we have also drafted recommendations which has been submitted to the Justice Ministry so that they could be included in the action plan based on the strategy, because very often strategies and action plans that are drafted behind the desks do not reflect the reality, and the practical aspects are more important and will result in better work or in better adjusted strategies and action plans. So when I participated in discussions on the probation service, I saw very open discussions in institutions, and they told us that there are a lot of things that you don't see from the outside, and we can tell you about the practical aspects of our work, which is very informative. And we would like to thank you for the cooperation from the inside, because you are inside the system and you see a lot of details which cannot be noticed from the outside. We discussed this through the Zoom facility, but Edgar Avakian, Deputy Head of the Probation Service, a couple of questions, then I will move on to discussions. You said that the probation service will reduce the load of judges. Did I understand this correctly? And you mentioned the mediation institution. The mediation has not been used in these 4 years, never, because this is foreseen for the trial and post-sentencing period. But I think this needs to be done, the mediation needs to be done in the pre-trial phase, so that we can avoid the cases in the trial phase in the court. And there are not probation professionals who will deal with this mediation. When it comes to reducing the load of the courts, of course, the prisons are different. Probation services reduced the load of the prisons. But when it comes to courts and judges, this is right the opposite. We give them more workload, because we present a lot of applications to the court. For example, The replacement of the imprisonment with different types of other alternative punishments. There are a lot of options we have here, and this becomes more of a workload for them, asking for the replacement of the imprisonment. And there are certain shortcomings when it comes to facilities. We are trying to address that. We have rented 4 or 5 premises, buildings and rooms in order to work. You mentioned about the Tavush region, which is, and the office is in the court judgment enforcement office premises. This is in Ejevan, in Tavush, and they will not relocate because there are because I don't think they will move from there because they have different rooms, and this is a building of the Justice Ministry. That's why we have to locate them there. When it comes to the personnel and the staff, Anush Ghazarian, head of the methodological department, will tell us more. If there are questions, we will answer with pleasure. You said the lack of internet connection. This is not an accusation directed at you. This is a problem that we need to resolve. You, as a structure, you have your functions to perform, and you are not responsible for ensuring the material technical basis of the refurbishments of your offices. Mediation is an alternative dispute resolution mechanism. One of them is probation. So this is not directly linked to the number of cases in courts. But if we look at the judicial reform, for example, electronic justice, which is the first point, penalties, etc., if they're automated and based on electronic platforms, this would be easier. This would make the work of the courts easier to reduce the load. Mediation and arbitrage, maybe Datevik will tell us a few words. Maybe we can. Maybe the probation services could. Maybe other institutions can get involved in the mediation work. There's an arbitration institution, for example, which is operating. Maybe we can involve those people in the work of the probation service, in the mediation for the probation service. Maybe next time we have discussions on mediation and arbitrage, we can invite also the probation services to participate in order to see how they can help. In the criminal and criminal procedural code drafts, we had the functions that had been ascribed to our service, and the changes that we recently are trying to introduce into those codes will be very helpful for our services, especially administrative supervision and house arrest and electronic monitoring would be very important. But I think the electronic monitoring systems are very important for us to be able to do the house arrest and other aspects of our work. Without that, we cannot do those functions properly. And then the personnel we have, the staff we have, is not enough adequate for performing our work. That's limitation of freedom and also expulsion of foreign residents from the country. And in addition, we have certain sanctions related to legal entities, legal persons, and we don't know how to do this in particular. We don't know how we can do that. And in the future, we need to have a larger number of staff after these drafts have been passed by the parliament, of course. We need more people to deal with those. I think the government of Armenia has an ambitious but good plan for Armenia to become an arbitrage country for third countries. So we'll establish an arbitrage centers in order to address the cases related to third countries. Georgia has such an experience. I don't know how successful we will be in implementing that. So, for example, when it comes to traffic accidents, road accidents, the Achilles organization, NGO, which dealt with these issues, are proposing to have a separate court for those issues, for traffic accidents. There's another recommendation from the Information Freedom Center, which says that there are different mechanisms in the world for receiving information. Let's say that journalist needs to receive information on probation service. Let's say you do not provide that, the service doesn't provide that information, and when they go to court, let's say 2 years later, the information is not necessary anymore, is not needed anymore. You should have had the information right on that day in order to be able to provide the report to the. So there are different recommendations that are being discussed. The equal opportunities bodies, for example. This is just a side information for other participants here around the table. Maybe they would be interested. First, I would like to thank for the comprehensive study that the expert has done. This is very important for us because all the institutions were included in the study. Since this is a new policy, since this is a new policy, new institution, we need to address all the aspects of the work that we do. The probation service this year, for at least, has tried to build awareness through the radio and TV stations. We have had responses and reactions. Yes, the public does not know much about the probation service. I would like the civil society organizations to also help us in awareness building. We have a lot of work done in re-socialization, educational, through state non-profit organizations, and the beneficiaries are willing and to cooperate with the probation service with pleasure. We have special directions for women because we have the probation service includes professional psychologists, and the psychologists help us to listen. They help us to guide the work of the probation professionals in order to reintegrate offenders in the society. And this is a very important aspect of our probation service work, and we are very happy that we have this function. The next is the educational services. We have training courses in the probation service, cooperating with state non-profit organizations. And we would like to have more professionals for training so that we will further expand our operation in this regard. We have English languages for decorative arts, for example. In the coming years, we want to add Russian language. We want to add barber skills and hairdressing and a number of other professions. So the more occupied the offender is, the beneficiary of the service is, the better situation they have, the better they feel, and they try to come and continue their education and take up training. And we have also put people in educational institutions for them to continue their studies. We also plan to publish booklets, and through those booklets we would like to inform the public about the work that our service does. This is what I can say about our work. You are a bit humble, you do more work, I'm sure, and you have the results you have. We have from the prosecutor's office. Do you have anything to say, or because you are involved in this issue and the legislative gaps also somewhat create problems for your work as prosecutors? Thank you. I'm the General Prosecutor's Office, and I'm a senior prosecutor for monitoring of the alternative punishment. I welcome this discussion, and we would like to have certain result here from these discussions. When it comes to probation service, there are a lot of gaps in the legal framework. The government is not yet able to succeed in covering all the gaps when it comes to legislation, but it's a work in progress. The issue is related to the criminal code and criminal procedural code, the new drafts. There are certain relationships here that need to be regulated, and these new amendments need to be passed by the parliament. So the probation service has done a lot of work, and we have a positive dynamic of the work that they do. And it is very noticeable in courts when it comes to parole or mitigation of the sentence. We see reports on those. And in the early stages of the work of the service, there were a lot of shortcomings, which have been surmounted already to a great extent, starting from the buildings, for example, the premises. It is correct psychologically, the beneficiaries think differently about the institution or about the service when they go to this or that building or this or that location. maybe we'll have to try to have a separate building for probation services in order for the beneficiaries to feel at ease when they come to use the services. And also the internet connection is very important and needs to be addressed. And this is a matter of time. I think I don't have clear information, but these problems seem to be easy to address, and these will be regulated in the future. From Human Rights Defender's Office, Hovannes Lukasyan. From the Torture Prevention Department of the Ombudsman's Office, Chief Specialist. We have a separate report on the probation service where all the issues have been mentioned. The material technical refurbishment or provisions on the locations of the buildings. In one of the regions, I think the probation service is in a building where we have the prosecutor's office, and there's a perception problem here. When the person goes to the service, he doesn't understand whether this is a department of the prosecutor's office or something else. And we have talked to a lot of professionals of the service, and they said that they need to have a uniform because there's a matter of presenting the service professionals to the beneficiary. We want to have a uniform, and so that we can show that we are representative of the government, of the state. But of course we have positive developments. We know that our employees, our staff members talk to inmates in different prisons. 2-3 years ago, for example, people would not know what probation service is, what is the purpose of the service. But in recent times, they tell us that they have become interested in the service, and the family members have tried to obtain information about those services, and they're gradually starting to understand what the service is for and what is the purpose of the service. Thank you very much, and this is very it's a source of huge delight for us to see that so many people are interested. I wanted to add that one of the functions of the HELSINKI Association in this project is to work with defense lawyers, because many defense lawyers do not have enough information and do not guide their clients. So we're trying to work with these defense lawyers, and related to the booklets. I don't know how important are booklets right now. People read those booklets or try to use the internet resources to get information. For example, Facebook has a paid advertisement service. Maybe that would work better than having a booklet printed. Of course, depending on the beneficiaries, maybe they like to see the booklet on paper. You see what is more effective, and we will try to see how we can help. Among my friends, there are people who have been involved in a traffic accident, and they're using the probation service, and they're very happy about that. And the more people would be able to use these possibilities, it would be better. As Bella mentioned, initially we had thought in our project to have a team of defense lawyers and to tell them how important the probation service is, but later we understood that we need not only to have defense lawyers involved, but also other structures who work with the probation service or involved in the probation service, and decided to bring everyone in addition to defense lawyers. Because the devil is in the details and there are a lot of gaps and issues that need to be addressed. And all of us need to come together to provide solutions, because separately all of us are doing a good job, which is properly evaluated, but the final result is not there yet. So let us hope that this difficult situation is nearing its end and the coronavirus situation will also improve, and we will try to come together with our professionals and further the discussions. And we attach huge importance to cooperation, of course, and mutual respect is very important to us and also makes us more obliged to do our work properly. And we would like to work with those people in prisons, those people who are using the services. And Arman Vezirian now from our office works with those beneficiaries, with the offenders directly, and we see that they're very happy with the services that they receive, and the situation is getting better and better. So some people were not even informed about what's being done by the probation service, and since they did not have information, they were not fully involved in the work that the probation service was doing, but nonetheless have benefited from the work that the service has done. And this is getting better and better. And it's very difficult to advocate a system where we do not have positive results, but we see that here we have a lot of positive results and we can build on that. Questions or issues or comments, if anyone is willing. Let us have coffee in that case if